of a Mexican restaurant. Protesters. Apparently she can't eat at a Mexican restaurant now. That's really nice. Well, I hope this has been a clarifying hour for you tonight. It's a really important hour for me, for all of you, for our country, our sovereignty, the kids, all of it. Border security, it's a very complex issue. A lot of you think it's simple.
New late-breaking details from the president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, and the FBI agent who created the appearance of bias by sending all those anti-Trump text messages to a colleague who appeared to be escorted from the Bureau building. And later, Pastor Robert Jeffress joins us live as politicians cite religion and the Bible in the immigration debates. Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. There are reports the anti-Trump FBI agent handling the Hillary Clinton email probe and the beginning of the Russia probe. Well, it appears he was escorted from the Bureau's building tonight. We'll try to clarify that. All while the Justice Department watchdog confirms his office is investigating if that agent's bias played a factor in the launch of the Russia investigation. We've got team coverage for you tonight. Kristen Fisher is following the latest from the wild night on Capitol Hill over immigration. But we begin with Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry with late-breaking details from the president's attorney. Good evening, Ed.
Yeah, good to see you, Shannon. First of all, Rudy Giuliani, he's taken a lot of criticism as the president's lead attorney from Democrats, saying that he's going off script and they're questioning his legal strategy. Well, tonight he was on with Sean Hannity. He said he's not backing down. He feels like they have a strong case. He's going on offense. Among other things, he told Sean that he believes James Comey should be in jail as these revelations about FBI abuses and biases continue to come out. He also actually, Rudy Giuliani, told the Daily Beast and pushed back on Brad Parscale, who's the incoming 2020 campaign campaign manager for the Trump campaign, was out on Twitter today saying that Jeff Sessions should be removed as Attorney General for his mishandling of the Russia investigation in Parscale's eyes. Well, I can tell you, Rudy Giuliani tonight is telling the Daily Beast that the political advisors should stay out of this, that he's in charge of this entire effort and is handling it just well, that Parscale and others are not attorneys and shouldn't get involved here. But he's saving most of his fire, Rudy Giuliani, tonight for Robert Mueller, that man there, the special counsel, telling our own Sean Hannity that it is highly unlikely at this point that the president will sit down for any kind of interview with Mueller. Listen.
Do I look crazy? So far, I still have all my senses, and I'm a heck of a lawyer, and I get drummed out of the profession if I did. I mean, the reality is you don't put your client in a kangaroo court.
Kangaroo court, he's calling the Mueller probe. The other thing is Giuliani is confirming to Fox tonight that he did talk to FBI agents a few months ago who wanted to know what kind of surprise he was teasing in the 2016 campaign. Was he getting some leaked information from inside the FBI or anything like that? Giuliani says he spoke to the FBI, they were working with the Department of Justice Inspector General, trying to find out if there were FBI leaks to Giuliani. He says there was really nothing there, and he thinks the matters, they've all moved on.
Okay, so Ed, what about these reports that somebody mentioned that they saw Peter Strzok being escorted out of the FBI building?
Yeah, it goes back actually to last Friday. And as the IG report came out with these damaging revelations, remember the bottom line was there's no bias at the FBI, except then the report itself listed all kinds of problems. That man there, Peter Strzok, the revelation still coming today. I'll get to that in a minute. But we're told that on Friday he was escorted, Peter Strzok, the man behind all those anti-Trump text messages, escorted last Friday out of the FBI headquarters building here in Washington. But somehow he still has a job tonight. He's basically just under review. His attorney is telling us they're trying to clear this up and that he is cooperating fully with an internal review at the FBI. Well, guess what happened today? There was another House hearing. Trey Gowdy, the Republican chairman, really laying out more anti-Trump text messages from Strzok, including one from 2016 where they talked about stopping Donald Trump at all costs in the campaign. You see Michael Horowitz there, the Justice Department Inspector General. I think Lindsey Graham, the Republican senator, may have put it best today by saying there's all these new revelations, yet anybody in Washington wants to talk about is immigration and child migration, when in fact there's revelation after revelation. And in fact, Democrat Elijah Cummings actually said this. He admitted that Democrats at the hearing, he said, would rather talk about the child migration issue as he talked about it in stark terms rather than talking about all this new information. Watch.
We should be able to agree that we will not keep kids in child internment camps indefinitely and hidden away from public view. What country is that? And I'm talking directly to my Republican colleagues. We need you to stand up to President Trump.
I want to go back to the no, he's not going to be president, we'll stop it. What do you think the it is in that phrase, we'll stop it?
Oh, I think it's clear from the context. We're going to stop him from becoming president.
Did you find any other FBI agents or FBI attorneys who manifest any animus or bias against President Trump?
We did.
How many?
We found 3 additional FBI agents, as we detail in the report.
So bottom line tonight, Peter Strzok was escorted out of the FBI headquarters building. A lot of people scratching their heads saying, what took basically a year to get that done? And yet, even though he's escorted out of the building, it appears he still has a job tonight, Shannon.
That's what his lawyer says. All right, Ed, thank you. Good to see you, too. All right, also new tonight, the president meeting with House Republicans on Capitol Hill to discuss immigration, saying it was a, quote, very good meeting. But one source tells Fox News the president's pitch was underwhelming. Well, Kristen Fisher is tracking all the latest tonight. She joins us live. Hi, Kristen.
Hey, Shannon. Yeah, it's been an absolutely wild night on Capitol Hill. Extreme displays of hostility towards President Trump over his policy of separating families at the border. First, a congressional intern yelled, "Mr. President, F you," as he was arriving at the Capitol. Then, as he was leaving, several members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus screamed in his face from just about 2 feet away. Watch this.
Quit separating the kids. They're separating the children. Mr. President, don't you have kids? Don't you have kids, Mr. President?
That was Democratic Congressman Juan Vargas from California. He then crashed an interview with his Republican colleague, Congressman Carlos Curbelo from Florida.
I hope you tell him not to put people in cages.
I think he wanted to talk to
I hope you tell him, though, about this. You are the one that we were hoping on, and you haven't helped us out on this at all, Carlos. It's wrong.
I wish that you would have been upset when the Obama administration had children.
Because we weren't doing this, and you know that. And that's what's wrong, and you guys are lying about it.
Now, President Trump is continuing to say that he can't change this policy of separating families at the border. Only Congress can do that. But Democrats and some Republicans say that's simply not true.
I know that the executive branch has the power to end these separations, and they should, at least while Congress is trying to find a permanent solution.
Mr. President, I'll lend you my pen. Any pen. You can fix it yourself.
Now, the whole reason that President Trump came to Capitol Hill tonight was to encourage House Republicans to fix it by passing a comprehensive immigration reform bill. Well, right now, there's 2 bills on the table, and tonight the president expressed his support for both of them.
These are laws that have been broken for many years, decades, but we had a great meeting. Thank you very much.
But it remains highly uncertain that either bill will pass. In the meantime, 11 Republican senators are now asking the Justice Department to stop separating families at the border until Congress can come up with a legislative fix. Not only are they worried about these children, they're also worried that images of children in cages, audio recordings of them crying, will end up really hurting Republicans heading into the midterms. Shannon?
All right, we're going to debate that in just a minute. Kristen Fisher, thank you very much. After taking the lead on explaining the family separation issue to the press, Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen dining at a D.C. Mexican restaurant tonight. Well, a short while ago, a group calling itself Metro D.C. Democratic Socialist, well, they interrupted her evening out.
No borders, no walls, sanctuary for all. No borders, no walls, sanctuary for all. No borders, no walls, sanctuary for all.
All right, no borders, no walls, no sanctuary for all. House Freedom Caucus member, Republican Congressman from Virginia, Dave Brat, joins us now with reaction to that and the rest of what's going on in the nation's capital. And there's quite a bit. How are you?
Thanks, Shannon. Great.
Okay, you were inside this meeting with the president today. Yep. How would you characterize it? We've heard people all over the spectrum. It wasn't great. It was fantastic. People were yelling and clapping and cheering. People were, weren't excited. What happened?
Yeah, I mean, he just kind of laid out all the issues, but he spent more time on immigration, covered the 2 bills, said, I got your back, and I just want to let you know. So people, going to make their decision between the Goodlatte bill and the moderate bill. And he just said, I got your back. And, that's the basic takeaway.
How would you explain the differences between the two bills? We obviously know the Goodlatte more conservative.
Yeah. And the Goodlatte bill, not even more conservative. Senator Obama was for E-Verify. Hillary Clinton was for those pieces. It's been around for 30 years. What's changed is the left has gone way left lately, right? So the Goodlatte bill has all the substantial pieces. If you don't have E-Verify in our legislation, you're going to be right back here in 5 years.
And again, so people understand, our audience is pretty sophisticated. They probably know, but E-Verify is where the employer has to use a system to vet everybody who comes to them for employment. And they're the ones then potentially who can face the criminal penalties and fines and those kinds of things if they don't use the system and don't use it properly.
Exactly. And that's the only thing that ends the magnet, right? The rest of the world would love to come to the United States. We're a great country. But we have to do it legally and rationally. And so if that was in place, that'll help. So I encourage my colleagues to vote for that.
But as much as you guys do on this in the House, what we're always told over on the Senate side is it can't pass here. E-Verify, even Republicans tell us they won't vote for E-Verify on the Senate side.
Yeah, well, I'd like to challenge them on that. And I just want to put 6 months of context. I won't go way back. But 6 months ago, remember, it was the Senate, the Democrats in the Senate, that did a government shutdown on DACA for $700,000. They said, you got to compromise with us. So what do? We said, good, let's compromise. We'll give you $700,000 DACA. And they said no to that deal. Then Trump says $1.8 million to the Democrats. And they say no to that deal. Then 25 of our colleagues leapfrog over Paul Ryan, go work with 200 Democrats for this, this more moderate bill. And now there's no Democrats at the table. And then today we've put in legislation, Meadows and Cruz and a few other people put in to help the parent separation bill.
To try to keep them together while they're going through legal
standalone bill, only on that. No tricks, no nothing. And Schumer's come out against that. So the Democrats don't want to come to the table, which leads you to the conclusion they just want a political issue come November, right? When they express all this concern for the kids and DACA and whatever, it's the Republicans who have come to the table on every single time with real legislation, and they've said no the 4 times in a row, and I could go way back further.
The fact is, to remind people, and again, we talked about the polling last night. The optics of this are not good for the White House and not good for anybody who supports what's happening at the border with the kids right now. There's a lot of misinformation. We've tried to clarify and knock down some of that, but the fact is you need Democrats in the Senate to get anything moving. They considered 4 different proposals on immigration, and they wouldn't get on board with enough of them, any of them, to get it moving. So if you think that they're using, and we talked about last night being cynical here in Washington, but if you think they're using it as a midterm issue, how do you get anything resolved when we're talking about real human beings?
Yep, it's going to be tough. I mean, the president brought up, he says, I got 9 new friends, all the, red state Democrats, right, in the Senate. So he says, that's how many we need. We need 9 votes. And so he said they're being friendly lately, but I doubt they're that friendly. So I think you're probably right.
I want to ask you about a letter that you signed on to. You want the Inspector General. You're one of a number of Republicans in the House who signed onto this letter saying in the IG's report there were 5 FBI employees that were identified as having some of these anti-Trump texts during the campaign. You don't know all the names, and you're telling the FBI or the Inspector General we want the names.
Yeah, there's lawyer number 2. Somebody wrote Viva la Resistance to take out Trump and ruin the presidency. And the stroke, everybody knows the major stories now, right? This guy was the head of the Hillary and declared her innocent ahead of time and then declared Trump guilty before he even assumed the presidency. And he's one of the higher end guys in the FBI.
And so you'll get the names?
Yeah, I think we will. I think the Freedom Caucus has been fighting forever, Jim Jordan, Meadows, and all those guys. But now leadership has come fully on board. I think by this Friday, we've got breaking news there.
All right. Let us know, Congressman Bragg. Great to have you with us.
You too, always. Thanks, Shannon.
Okay. Journalists are declaring the immigration drama disastrous for the Trump administration. The Wall Street Journal opines restrictionists may cost Republicans their majorities in Congress. The Hill news site warns child separation crisis risks Katrina moment for Trump. Let's bring in Fox News politics editor and editor of the Halftime Report, Chris Steyerwalt. How are you tonight, sir?
Howdy, ma'am.
Okay, so let's look at some polling on this. Recent polling on which party does better with these things. One of them is border security. The Republicans have a 14-point percentage point spread of an advantage there. But when it comes to immigration, they're in a deficit where Democrats are up 7 percentage points on that. What do you do with those numbers?
Well, midterm elections are traditionally about base versus base. And I think both parties are being pretty enormously cynical about this subject. The goal here among Republicans, this fires up the Republican base. this, as much as it does cause broad harm in the electorate, the persuadable voters, independents, and folks in the middle who are trying to figure out which way they're going to go. This does hurt Republicans with that group, but it helps them with their base because there are those who are skeptical about the president's commitment to really cracking down. These images may be horrific to a lot of voters, but to the president's base, it says, hey, we are getting tough. We are being mean, and that's what's necessary in this case in order to make it work. For Democrats, there is an equal and opposite reaction, which is their base kicks right back into full gear. You couldn't keep a Democrat away from the polls today if you tried. So that's the reality, is that this issue, it absolutely fires up both ends of the political spectrum.
Okay, I want to play a little bit of what the president had to say speaking at the National Federation of Independent Businesses. He talked a lot about immigration, about the policy, about who's going to resolve it, about getting tough on the borders. And I want you to react to this, and we'll include the reaction that the audience gave him.
Maybe it's politically correct, or maybe it's not. We got to stop separation of the families. But politically correct or not, we have a country that needs security, that needs safety, that has to be protected.
He had a number of applause lines like that today, and they all ended the same, with basically the whole room erupting in support of what he was saying about getting tough.
Well, he wasn't talking at the National Council of La Raza, Counselor.
No.
He went to the NFIB, which is the most conservative. I mean, these are small business owners.
Yeah.
They are in diggity down.
But you know that there are a lot of business groups, the Chamber and others, who are very much advocating on a more relaxed system when it comes to immigration. They need the workers,
Sure.
and they often are at odds with him on this kind of stuff.
Absolutely, but trust me, they chose this audience with this in mind. The president even joked about how he picked the right audience there. And there's no question that small businesses have a different point of view here than big businesses, because they rely less on large numbers of cheap workers, and they feel differently about the situation. So I think the president summed up the argument there pretty well, that though this is harmful broadly to Republicans' reputation with persuadable voters, with suburbanites, with swing voters for the Republican base. And basically the president's speech today was the kind of campaign speech we're going to hear from him more and more. Lots of red meat for the Republican base. And then a listing of his accomplishments and say, or do you want to give it back to these Democrats? And it'll work.
Well, we know that turnout is going to be key for either side when it comes to getting people to show up and get up and vote at these midterm elections. Chris Stirewalt, you'll be with us all along the road. It's several months away. We'll have a number of controversies between now and then.
This is true.
Not yours, not mine, hopefully. Thank you.
You bet.
All right, the president is expected to discuss Chinese telecom ZTE tomorrow with senators who are seeking to restore a ban that prevents the company from buying U.S. components for 7 years. Those talks are looming after a White House threat to slap another $200 billion in tariffs on Chinese imports, leading to yet another of what some on Wall Street call a tariff tantrum, where markets plunge at first on that kind of news. The Dow down 400 at one point before recovering a bit as the talks continue. The Dow ultimately ended down 287. To avoid more such unpleasantries, free trade supporters are urging President Trump's trade advisor, Peter Navarro, to tone down his rhetoric ahead of that July 6th deadline on these tariffs.
What we need for the American people is an enforceable, accountable, systematic change, structural in nature, so that we can have free, fair, and balanced trade, not just with China, but with the rest of the world. And we are looking forward to that day, but that is not this day.
I've never been a big fan of Peter Navarro. So the president himself kind of goes along with it. I think the president's got to wake up and realize that's not the way to go.
The trade dispute is making for strange bedfellows, with some Democratic leaders supporting the White House, including Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. They don't agree on a whole lot. All right, media figures and lawmakers on the left comparing the immigrant holding facilities to slave pens or Nazi concentration camps. We'll examine the media coverage of the border situation, which in many ways isn't new. Next.
Some have argued that these detention centers are reminiscent of Japanese internment camps or even concentration camps in Nazi Germany.
So what does the coverage tell us about media motives, possibly in the immigration debate? Stay with us. We'll be right back. The border taking on a life of its own, with journalists who have an obligation, we all do, to be fair and objective, turning into full-on advocates. Trace Gallagher is looking into that for us tonight. Good evening, Trace.
Shannon, in just the past 3 days on CNN and MSNBC, there have been 12 comparisons between Homeland Security detention centers and Nazi concentration camps. Let's start with the morning shows.
Children are being marched away to showers. I know they're being marched away to showers, or they're being told they are, just like the Nazis had said that they were taking people to showers and then they never came back. So you'd think they'd use another trick.
Bottom line, Donald Trump increasingly looks like Hitler in Nazi Germany.
Then there's former CIA Director Michael Hayden, who tweeted a picture of Auschwitz and wrote, quote, "Other governments have separated mothers and children." He then went on CNN.
I know we're not Nazi Germany, all right? But there is a commonality there and a fear on my part that we have standards we have to live up to.
The analogies fail to mention that in concentration camps, 6 million Jews died. In detention centers, we've not heard of a single injury this year. NPR host Maria Hinojosa also drew the Nazi comparison, then suggested the detention centers might soon be filled with pedophiles.
I'm just thinking, Stephanie, in terms of the logistics of taking care of these people. I'm so worried about how many pedophiles are now signing up to go and work in these places.
Turns out Ana Navarro, who is a Republican and a contributor for CNN, ABC, and Telemundo, believes all Latinos should oppose President Trump, tweeting, quote, "I know immigrants don't all think alike. We are not a homogenous blob, but for the life of me, I don't get how any Latino or any immigrant or child of an immigrant can possibly work for Trump and still live with their conscience. Alex, Elaine, among others, I'm talking to you." She's apparently referring to Labor Secretary Alexandra Acosta and Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao. And did you see CBS morning host Gayle King try to intimate that a border resident named Frank is a hypocrite? Watch.
My opinion is we can't just open up the borders.
What's the solution?
Oh my gosh, I don't know.
As an immigrant yourself?
Well, work with their governments, with their countries, where they're from, and try and get them to some jobs out there.
But you came here,
yes,
seeking a better life.
Yes.
Doesn't that seem like a contradiction?
Frank came to the U.S. when he was 7 and gained citizenship at 18. Finally, the Occupy Wall Street Twitter account published a cartoon promoting the murder of immigration agents, including instructions on how to stab them to death. The group later called it satire. Shannon.
All right, Trace Gallagher, thank you very much. So is the coverage fair? Let's talk about it with tonight's panel. The Hill's media reporter, Joe Concha, is with us, and also analyst Gianno Caldwell. Great to have you both here with us tonight.
Hey, Shannon.
Okay, so let's talk about just some hard numbers here. Media comparison about the nightly broadcasts on, these are the primary networks on Monday. You remember the Inspector General was sitting there before Congress, before the Senate all day. ABC had 8 minutes and 17 seconds, these are approximate times, on immigration. And then on the IG hearing, 2 minutes, 28 seconds. CBS, 13 minutes and 16 seconds on immigration, 10 seconds on the hearing. NBC reportedly had 9 minutes, 52 seconds on the immigration and border stuff, and no coverage on the Inspector General testifying on the Hill. Joe, any surprise to you?
I think we look for a lot of sizzle in our media more than steak. And obviously, the IG report had a lot of steak in it, right? Ask Peter Strzok, who was escorted from the building on Friday, still has a job as Ed Henry, reported. But yeah, that's obviously a huge story. And to think that it didn't at least get a minute or two, if you even gave it half of what immigration got, that would be something that I'd say, all right, that's fine. I totally get it, given the emotions around the immigration story. So this again shows a media that's priorities are completely out of whack, and unfortunately, I have to say agenda-based, because obviously this IG report was bad for the FBI and possibly good for President Trump in terms of dismissing an obstruction of justice sort of argument against him in terms of what lawyers have been saying.
And Gianno, you know, a lot of people, the minute you invoke anything about Nazism or the Holocaust, it's very upsetting whether someone on the right does it, someone on the left, someone in the center does it. For a lot of people, it minimizes to them. They worry that it minimizes the millions who died in the Holocaust. Yes. Others will say, hey, it's the only way to bring attention to something we think is on the same level. What do you say?
You know what? The first and foremost, the comparisons are completely and totally disgusting. Now,
if those comparisons had been made in 2014 when President Obama was in office, which we know the conditions were far more draconian, then it would be a point to it. But what we've seen is the media, who's become the complete and total boogeyman, and to me, seemingly the publicity arm for the DNC. When you think about some of the numbers in which we've used to care for some of the folks that have come over into our country illegally, talk about $958 million, almost $1 billion last year, almost $1 billion expected to be spent this year. You got to wonder, how is it that some folks in the media are saying that folks aren't being taken care of? Furthermore, Republicans like President Trump and others have extended a hand in terms of legislation to get Democrats on board to actually correct this issue when it comes to immigration as a whole. And Democrats completely and totally, in my view, want to keep this issue alive into the midterm elections. That's the only thing that makes sense at this point.
Joe, what do you think about the fact that it appears to many people on the outside, if you're looking at somebody who's a straight reporter, a straight journalist who's showing up at the border to say, these are the numbers about how many people, this is what's happening when they're separated, this is how many days they're separated, versus people who've now, it seems morphed into advocacy. I mean, can you be a journalist and an advocate on a story at the same time? Do you think the line has blurred? I mean, what are you seeing?
You can't be a journalist and advocate at the same time. If you want to be that, then you're more than welcome in your paper to go from reporter to the op-ed section. Or if you work for a cable news outfit, go from anchor to opinion host. But you can't be both. And we're seeing more anchors and reporters and pundits not interested in reporting facts, but instead sharing their innermost feelings on the matter. And to Gianno's point, I mean, it's exactly correct. I mean, in order to solve the problem, we need to put away the emotions. I know that's hard here. Yeah. I got a 4-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old son, and that includes a media that has far too many members that want to be celebrities instead of journalists, and the way they go about being a celebrity is to say these things that are hyperbolic, so they go viral, so the story becomes them instead of us concentrating on the problem in solving it.
Yeah, and just one last point on that, I completely agree with what you just said, Joe, and it's interesting that Hillary Clinton said something in 2014. She said, we have to send a clear message. Just because your child gets across the border doesn't mean your child gets to stay. We don't want to send a message that is contrary to our laws or will encourage more children to make that dangerous journey, end quote. That was an even balanced message from Hillary Clinton at that time. I don't know what happened since then, but certainly that's something that I think all should take under consideration.
Someone else is the president now.
Yeah.
Okay,
fair.
Gianno and Joe, great to have both of you with us tonight. Thank you.
Good to see you again.
All right, the immigration debate reaching biblical proportions, with both Republicans and Democrats invoking, quoting scripture to support their views and to reject the other side's position.
It is very biblical to enforce the law. That is actually repeated a number of times throughout the Bible.
Dr. Robert Jeffress, the pastor of First Baptist Dallas, is here with his views on politicians using the Bible in the middle of the fight of this very messy battle. Look for us tonight.
It was the soundbite that launched a theological firestorm. Attorney General Jeff Sessions, responding to criticism that family separation at the border is immoral, cited a biblical passage to defend the policy.
I would cite you to the Apostle Paul and his clear and wise command in Romans 13 to obey the laws of the government, because God has ordained the government for his purposes.
No sooner had the words left his lips than many of Sessions' severest critics found religion, or at least some biblical quotes, to counter what he was preaching.
I have actually studied the Bible pretty carefully since I was a child. And I don't remember the part where it says that ripping children from their parents' arms is divinely or morally commanded. I do remember passages that say, "Thou shalt not oppress the stranger."
For the House Minority Leader, Sessions' biblical quote was ammunition to tear into the AG, the administration, and millions of people of faith.
And the very hypocrisy of the Attorney General to quote the Bible, the hypocrisy of all people of faith in our country not to clamor for this, for what the administration is doing to end.
There was no shortage of hypocrisy, as one critic saw in this Planned Parenthood tweet that urged keep families together. Brenda Hill-Skylstad fired back. That's rich coming from you. The ever-loyal spokeswoman for all things Trump and a daughter of a Southern Baptist preacher herself laid down the law from high. atop the briefing room podium.
I can say that it is very biblical to enforce the law. That is actually repeated a number of times throughout the Bible.
Atlantic magazine writer Jeffrey Goldberg had an entirely different interpretation of the good book.
One of the themes of the Bible is don't do something that is immoral, even if the ruler tells you to do it. So it's not the strongest ground in the world that the Attorney General is standing on.
If God is watching all this, he is no doubt aware that this is Washington and that this is an election year, and that in the heat of rhetorical battle, some may need forgiveness for forgetting John chapter 8, verse 7, quote, "Let him who is without sin cast the first stone." Shannon?
Doug, we all need the mercy and forgiveness every day. Thank you. All right, is it a wise move for politicians to resort to scripture in this debate? Let's talk about it with Pastor of First Baptist Dallas, Dr. Robert Jeffress. Great to have you with us tonight, sir.
Thanks, Shannon.
All right, I want to play something that's getting a lot of attention. This comes from Democratic Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. I want to play a little bit of what she had to say in a podcast talking about some passages in Ephesians and how some of what she's seeing now that's being carried out on Capitol Hill is what she described as evil. Here's a bit of her comments.
There's a lot of ideas right now that are in this country that are dark ideas, building walls, dividing this country, marginalizing trans members who are troops, marginalizing kids who are transgender, not supporting DACA kids. These are all things that come from the darkness, that are ripping children from their mother's arms. That's outrageous.
Now, Doctor, a lot of people say on Capitol Hill she attends numerous Bible studies. She is genuine in her faith and feeling like she's calling these things out for what they are. Not that she's called the administration or the president evil, but these ideas. What do you say?
Well, she may be sincere, but she's sincerely wrong. To characterize the president's actions in this as evil, to me, is absolutely outrageous. Look, Romans chapter 13 does say God instituted government to maintain order and to punish those who commit evil. And to call the president evil for simply doing what God has given him the responsibility of doing, and that is protecting our borders and protecting our citizens, to me, that is outrageous. And I think we ought to celebrate a president like President Trump rather than denigrate this president for doing everything he can to fulfill his God-given responsibility. And Shannon, I have to point out the hypocrisy here of Kirsten, the senator, in saying that it's evil to rip children out of their mother's arms. Well, what about the evil of ripping children out of their mother's wombs after dismembering them through abortion? Where is the outrage from this senator on that policy, which her Democrat party supports? To me, this is selective outrage on the part of liberals.
But let's ask about these children now at the border, because people across the spectrum, political, religious, and otherwise, are saying it's just a situation that all of us should have a heart and we should want there to be a solution. But when people from both sides throw in the Bible in this discussion, it gets very heated.
Yeah, and look, I think the Bible does teach we ought to show compassion wherever we're able to show compassion, but that compassion needs to be a shared compassion. Yes, it is gut-wrenching to see these children separated from their parents at the border. The only thing more gut-wrenching is to see children like Kate Steinle separated from their parents forever because they were killed by illegal immigrants or MS-13 gang members. And so let's show compassion. Let's show compassion for everyone. And Shannon, I've got to say this. I know this president. He is a compassionate man. I've been in the Oval Office with him and seen him agonize over the Dreamers. But he has also said, I have to keep America safe. I will not compromise American security. And again, I think we ought to thank God every day we have a president like that.
Yeah, he has indicated his emotional turmoil over this and that he wants to find a solution ASAP.
Yes.
I want to play a little bit of Chris Pratt, the actor, on MTV last night. This is getting a lot of attention. Then get your reaction.
You have a soul. God is real. God loves you. God wants the best for you. Believe that. I do. Learn to pray. It's easy and it's so good for your soul.
Well, I mean, quite a reaction there. We don't have much time, but I want to get a quick reaction from you too.
You know, this is such a needed message for young adults who've been taught all of their life that they're nothing but biological accidents who are living in a random universe to which there is no purpose, and that when they die, that's all there is. You know, that leads to despair, it leads to addiction, it leads to these indescribable acts of violence. And I think this is a message of hope to say there's more to life than what we see. There is a soul. We have a creator God to whom we're accountable. That is a great message of hope that we need for right now.
Everybody needs hope, that's for sure. And he did also say, you're not perfect. And all of us should remember that too. Right. All right, Dr. Jeffress, great to have you with us.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you. All right, the UN says the U.S. should be stepping up, not stepping out. But Ambassador Nikki Haley says it is past time for America to take a stand against what she's calling a cesspool of political bias.
We take this step because our commitment does not allow us to remain a part of a hypocritical and self-serving organization that makes a mockery of human rights.
United Nations Human Rights Council opening Monday's session with a blistering attack on President Trump's immigration policies. Well, tonight, the U.S. is making an unprecedented move. Rich Edson has details.
Good evening, Shannon. Calling it a hypocritical, self-serving organization that makes a mockery of human rights, the Trump administration is announcing it's withdrawing the United States from the United Nations Human Rights Council. Administration officials say they tried to reform the council for more than a year, failed in that effort, and now they're leaving it. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and UN Ambassador Nikki Haley announced the decision from the State Department today. Pompeo says some of the worst offending countries are sitting on the council, like China, Cuba, and Venezuela. Ambassador Haley says the council obsessively mistreats Israel, passing more resolutions against Israel than against North Korea, Iran, and Syria combined.
If the Human Rights Council is going to attack countries that uphold human rights and shield countries that abuse human rights, then America should not provide it with any credibility.
Democratic Senator Chris Coons, a member of the Foreign Relations Committee, says, quote, "We need to show up, be constructive, and work with our allies to isolate bad actors. This decision weakens the United States' influence on the Council and makes it harder for us to advance our other foreign policy and national security goals." Ambassador Haley says the U.S. would rejoin the Council if it reforms. Shannon?
Rich Hudson at the State Department, thank you. Time now for Where in the World. Amid the migrant ship controversy, European leaders are calling for the creation of a new holding facility outside the European Union. That can help officials, they say, better differentiate between refugees and migrants who are more likely to face return to their home countries. European Union Council President Donald Tusk says he doesn't want, quote, concentration camps, but centers where people can find shelter and medicine. Well, at least 3 dead, several others wounded following a shooting possibly involving automatic weapons at an internet cafe in the Swedish city of Malmö. Officials say there's no indication of terrorism. They're linking the shooting to gangs and organized crime they say have riddled the city. A top German official is calling for a year-long hiatus for political talk shows on TV because he believes their agenda is fueling anti-immigration fervor. Olaf Zimmermann, who heads the German Cultural Council, argues the nation's public broadcasters are obsessed with refugee-related issues and often frame them negatively. Well, a Chicago school invites an anti-police extremist to career day. Parents are outraged. How did it happen? The story is next.
He told them that all the police were bad and all the police wanted to.
Outrage at a Chicago public school. An anti-police extremist invited to talk to students on career day. Not everyone's happy. Matt Finn digs into the details tonight. Hey, Matt.
Shannon, this anti-police extremist known as Ethan Ethos calls himself a radical, and parents say they had no idea he was invited to speak to their children on career day at Wildwood Elementary School here in Chicago. Back in February, when a Chicago police commander was shot and killed, Ethos posted online, "F him and his family." Ethos also uses the term CPDK, which apparently stands for Chicago Police Department Killer. He refers to officers as pigs online and posted about killing all the rich people. The Chicago principal says she brought in Ethos to speak to students about his poetry and activism. But here's what one mother with 3 children who listened to Ethos said actually happened.
He told them that all the police were bad and all the police wanted to kill people. I was very disappointed that someone would come into the school and preach hate about the police. Or even if he was talking about anyone else, it would have upset me.
In an apology letter, the principal wrote, in part, "I was present when his narrative took a negative turn about policing, at which point I immediately intervened. I care about your children and would never intentionally expose them to or endorse this type of negativity." Some parents we talked to say the principal invited Ethos because she's been pressured to introduce anti-police philosophy to students. Otherwise, parents say the principal was doing an excellent job. One Chicago police officer whose children went to this school says now the students have also been exposed to Ethos police-hating websites.
Insulted, angry. I can't believe that she didn't vet him properly. Look on his Facebook account, because some of the things that are on his Facebook account are absolutely horrible.
Ethos denied our request for an interview, and on his social media pages, he alleges that a Chicago police officer killed one of his friends. The principal had many years left in her contract, but she insists it wasn't this controversy that forced her to suddenly retire. Shannon.
All right, Matt, thank you very much. Stay with us. Tonight's Midnight Hero is a decorated veteran working to shine the spotlight on others for